You're in the sun.
We'll probably need to bring. Are we going to go 10 first?
Yes? Yes.
She's right there.
Yeah, because there's no presentation.
Pardon?
There's no slides or anything, so...
Do you have a PowerPoint there?
No.
Comedy.
You are.
Try Annalie.
James,
There, ask him. Ask him. Where did they go?
Say you've got a really bad flu and don't want to come down to
ask James.
you know. Can you cough a few times into the throat?
Yeah, step up to James. All right. Christmas presents.
Cheery.
Sorry, just getting myself organised.
Kia ora tātou. Just before we start more formally the RPC for this afternoon, for those who have just arrived, Debbie and those others, Anei he mihi kia koutou, hoki maira. I just take this moment over here, just in the corner. We've talked about the Māori Partnerships team. Well, here it is. I'm one. Amy Minster is another. Amy is our Senior Advisor Māori, and then beside Amy on the left-hand side is Joella Brown. Some of you might know Joella. Joella is our Māori Engagement Coordinator. We compose the Māori Partnerships team for Hawke's Bay Regional Council. So this is an introduction. Please make them welcome. Back to our
She'll be a lot better by the time.
What do I just...
And do some work, right?
Yeah, I'll deal with that. And then we'll have to... Yes. Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Here I am.
Oh, there we go.
First.
Thank you, Rick, for starting the program.
Well, I knew you would support me in making sure that things were done correctly and by protocol, regardless of the time.
Good guys. Are you?
No.
We have a team.
I'm glad you said that thanks after, because they're good. Good.
Well, when they mentioned, they referenced the Māori Partnership Group, I didn't know what they were talking about this morning, so now this is a kind of productive. I didn't have any problem with
Oh, yes. Oh, has someone taken... Oh, here it is.
So handsome.
Someone's...
Well informed.
Gosh.
Yes. I need another tree.
Could I take it over to your tree?
I mentioned this at the portal yesterday.
It'll last for 8 years, 2 years.
Yeah, there's already quite a few lining up for it.
Did I leave it there? Got the rain highlighted in it?
Not that we haven't been working.
Jay? Yes, that's yours. Thank you.
What was your
It was just
magic? Yeah, that's
I wanted to be out by now, I've had a guts full of it.
Everything.
But we're halfway through transition. Right, what's this all about?
Just while we're waiting, did anyone pick up my agenda papers?
Ones with all your secret notes written on.
Yeah, with all the
They're up on
exclamation
Facebook
marks.
already.
Yes. Did anyone pick up those?
What's the ransom first?
I didn't know that you'd accepted.
What's happening? You fellas
Okay.
take notes, can't
We're
you?
a bit
Sorry.
Yeah, but we've always had the...
Came through the emails.
Do you know our real strategy for taking over?
Sorry.
Is that everyone will wake up and they'll whakapapa te kahanga.
I'm going to blame James.
I'm pretty sure hopefully you can anyway.
The All Blacks or the Maori All Blacks?
They'll just change it over.
It's far.
Okay. All right. Well, let's make a start, everybody.
You do.
Okay. Do we? We've already had a welcome. We've already had karakia from this morning, so we're all heavily blessed. So now we'll just move on to notices.
Just a question's been asked
Yes.
on the side. Do we have a quorum?
Do we have a quorum?
He passes.
Yes, I get that.
Accepting that? Is it accepted?
You have to, it's in our rules.
They're entitled to nominate.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
in
so
our
that's what I'm
rules.
saying. This committee's
Well, we have to say
receives it, receives
Oh,
it.
in our act of parliament.
No, we don't.
Go home.
Yep.
Okay, everyone, thank you. We can confirm we have a quorum.
Numbers of committee members present are?
Beg your pardon? 14.
Numbers, sorry?
14. And I think if we could just deal with apologies, then I'd like to deal with a nomination next.
Chair,
But
just to assist, we will have 14 if we approve the receipt of two whare toa. Otherwise, we have 30.
15.
no, she's counted 14. Yeah, we've got 15. Okay, so confirming that for the commencement of this meeting, we have 14 duly appointed councillors
Yep.
and tangata whenua reps.
Good.
We can proceed.
Yes.
Thank you. So apologies, please.
From Toro Waka and Rex Gray.
So Toro and Rex,
And Alan Dick for lateness.
Alan Dick
Dick
for
for
lateness. Thank
medical
you.
reasons.
Yes. Anybody else?
Got to leave at
Medical
3:30.
Yeah,
So
and me.
Nikki Kirikiri needs to leave at 3:30
And me.
and me, Corona.
And me.
And
Kapai, thank you. Can I have someone move the apologies?
3 me's.
Thank you, Paul. Second,
Seconded.
a whakaai tātou. Thank you.
That means we lose the quorum at 3:30.
Yes. So moving swiftly on to the next matter, we have notification from Tū Whare Toa in terms of replacing Matthew. As you know, he ceased to be a member of the RPC after missing 3 meetings, albeit with apologies, in accordance with our terms of reference. And so you should have a copy of an email from Pieri to myself and others, just advising that Sir Te Hiuhiu has advised us, which is on the second page, that he would like to appoint Mike Mohi in a temporary role representing Tū Whare Toa on the RPC until such time as a new appointment can be confirmed. I'll just to conclude that, my understanding according to the terms of reference is we don't need to be approving this. This is simply for our notification because one of the requirements is that you all receive notice. So we will, if you're satisfied with that.
Just to qualify that, Chair, so it's actually the legislation and not the terms of reference that requires the receipt, and then as soon as practicable for each of you to receive written notice of that appointment.
And so notice has also been sent to Hoi and Ngāti Pāhauira.
Will be, because written notification is just circulating now.
It's just been circulated. Okay, I'm comfortable with that. We don't need to move or second it, this is just for notification. So welcome, Mr Mohi.
Kia ora, mate.
Okay, so on that basis, we now have a quorum of 15. We now have 15. Okay, so can I have any declarations of conflicts of interest? None? Thank you. Do we need to move anything? No. And let's move on to the minutes then. Item 3. You should have all received the 17th of April minutes. Please sing out if you have any amendments or corrections or additions. Starting on page 2. Page 3. Page 4. And page 5. If there are no changes, I ask someone please move. I ask someone please move the minutes. Thank you, Paul. And seconder, thank you, Councillor Bevan. Whakaai tātou?
Aye.
Thank you.
But we had to have equal numbers.
No, not full quorum. Okay, thank you. So next item is follow-ups from previous Regional Planning Committee meetings. Looking to staff with that.
So the first one is Jo. Is she here? I suppose we'll just take, are there any questions on each of the items, and we can respond to them. So Jo's available if you've got any questions in terms of follow-up 1 and 2. And I'll take that as a no, Chair. So in terms of item 3, an email was circulated. I'm looking at RP. It was your question in terms of the Three Waters Tangata Whenua engagement, and we circulated that email from those people, and hopefully I haven't heard back, so I was assuming that that's discharged that query.
Task complete, thank you.
And in terms of the terms of reference, there was a discussion at Mohaka around just process going forward in terms of progressing that, and I'm taking it that pity in terms of that there hasn't had the opportunity for those people to get together in a room to progress that request. So that may well form part of your next agenda.
Thank you. No questions? Do I need to move? Do we need to get a mover? Can I have a mover? Oh, you have a question or mover? Move. Thank you, Fenton.
I don't know whether it fits here or maybe in the next item, but yesterday there was a pre-RPC meeting of the Tangata Whenua
Yes.
representatives on this committee, and I think it would be helpful for us to have some sort of a report or update prior to the decision items being discussed, if that's possible.
Yep, I'm comfortable with that, absolutely. So we can add that to the agenda. Thank you. So Fenton moved.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Whakaai tātou?
Aye.
So call for items of business not on the agenda, so we've had one already from Councillor Bevan. Any other items anyone would like to add to the agenda? Nothing? Okay, thank you. That's that done.
Probably just by way of notice, as was mentioned in this morning, a reminder that the Ministry for Environment will be meeting to engage with iwi and Tangata Whenua on this week on Friday. Start of a regime of engagement that MFE are hoping to do. And I think, as I mentioned earlier today, there may be some opportunities for us to present some things at that forum, which I'm happy to carry on behalf of the RPC to that forum. And I'll just leave that in everyone's mind so that we know we've got that avenue. Kia ora.
Madam Chair, just pursuant to that, I note that this is the second of a series of engagements, the last of which last year was in July. Is there anything that the Council should be aware of in advance about any representations that might be made at that event that may be similar to representations made last year?
Well, I've already given my apologies for the hui, and I think as Tangata Whenua reps, we've only, we haven't really discussed anything yesterday about what we would be putting forward other than RP's useful suggestion to MFE. I'll just add that this meeting has been called at short notice, so I'm not sure who of the Tangata Whenua reps will be attending. Are any of the Tangata Whenua reps planning to attend?
No. I might be, Madam.
Yeah, so there might be only 2, for example. Any rebellions you're planning there, RP?
So soon after lunch? No, Madam Chair. I'll just let lunch settle first. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think the only matter was the coordination of perhaps some funding to source information. Yeah. But thank you for the question. Okay, thanks for that. So in terms of decision items, that would take us to the additional agenda item of report back on behalf of the tangata whenua reps about the discussion yesterday. Yes, thank you. So this would be on the outstanding water bodies plan change, which is one decision item, and tank, which is the other decision item.
Kia ora no. So the main discussion was around outstanding water bodies, and I put the table up on the screen before. I've circulated that to Anna Lee she can pass that on to the members. The other thing we propose is a amendment to the recommendations, which is effectively noting Ngāti Pahuera and Tūrimatu or Tūhoi have excluded themselves from the outstanding water bodies process. Just want to acknowledge that in the recommendations. That's pretty much the outcome of yesterday's meeting. The notes we provided with Anna Lee for circulation this morning. So
I think the only other thing I would add, and I'd invite the tangata whenua reps to add anything else as you wish, because Ricky's been put on the spot to deliver that just now, is in terms of also the recommendations, we discussed the need to deal with the issue of deficit of information in relation to some of those sites, as we've already been over, but that is a matter that would need to be dealt with as part of those resolutions moving forward. And I think when we get to that point, I think Ricky and Tom have had a discussion already, and there might be some clarification around how much work is actually involved, just to allay some of the concerns we heard this morning. So we can deal with that when we get to talking about outstanding water bodies. Is there anything else that tangata whenua reps wanted to add to the report from Ricky?
There were two
Decision item. Yeah, so I think because I've had a request to swap the agenda items around because staff are still analysing the results of the STAR exercise. We will probably be turning next to the tank plan change and then follow that by the outstanding water bodies decision item. I think it's fair to say that in terms of what I heard yesterday and what tangata whenua talked about is the volume of material that we were asked to review prior to this meeting, and it was appreciated that the outstanding water bodies file did come a little bit earlier. However, still the papers were quite significant in terms of what these two meaty issues that we have been dealing with, and there was certainly a concern and a desire expressed that the tank decision should be deferred to the next hui, on the basis that there just hadn't been sufficient time to get through all the materials on the outstanding water body kaupapa as well as tank. But we can bring that up when we get to that. But that was the other thing that we discussed yesterday, which is fair to alert you to. Wasn't part of the advice that we received, but was something that we discussed.
Yep.
Just as the Tūwhare Toa rep, on the 25th of April, I flew around the Ōwhaoko East area with the Minister of Conservation, and she was quite astounded as to the flow of the Ngaruroro over those coming out of Tūwhare Toa and down. It wasn't just a little stream, it was a major water source that was coming down.
Okay, and just a reminder, please, I've just been reminded, we've got Marianne on our video there, who can only hear us really if we're talking into our mics, so just please be aware of that. See if she can.
Excuse me, Chair. Can I just seek a little bit of guidance about whether the preference of the committee would be to just up front in terms of the agenda management, just defer the whole item on tank for today and we let Marianne go, or do you want to take the opportunity today to go through some of the issues and make some progress today, at least in terms of questions of staff and discussion?
Well, I'll put it out to the committee for feedback on that. That was a concern raised by tangata whenua. Their preference was to defer. To give more time. We are very mindful that a key part of the report back in this...
Is praise and worship.
Very appropriate.
I think that's an automatic shout the pub.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Let that be noted. We're very mindful that a significant part of the report back included letters and comments and feedback as part of the pre-notification consultation, including from our own iwi and other groups, and that there just hasn't been the time to look at that properly in any detail and then interrogate that to some extent to make so that we're in a comfortable position to be able to deal with it at this hui. So that was the concern.
So can I just ask our staff, what does that do to your timeframes?
It's quite simply defers our timeframes by a meeting cycle.
Yeah.
And so we would be having this discussion at our July meeting. At that July meeting, we would be seeking, your input into the next iteration of the plan change, and then it allows for some further consultation with those parties who made submissions, and then it would be the following meeting, which is August. Maybe late August. I'll be overseas. Will be all things going well, will be the decision to notify.
There was also one item, if I recall, from the recommendations as part of the tank work that was going to be fed back at the next meeting, not at this hui. That's right. So there was going to be some
in terms of some stormwater
stuff. So that was going to be fed back at the next meeting in any event.
Yeah, I think we had a feeling that was sufficiently non-contentious that it probably wouldn't.
Okay. Comments, RP?
Yes, so just from my perspective, I know that this has been 6 years in the making and a revolutionary collection of participants to get us to this point, and I actually really would like to honour that effort and investment, and I haven't had the time to be able to digest this information, and I think to engage even initially in a conversation at this stage wouldn't provide me with the ability to engage effectively with the members of this committee without looking into this material. So I'm suggesting that perhaps it would be a better investment of everyone's time to defer.
Other views? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not unhappy about deferring it, but I would like to see, before we had a decision having been made in a committee meeting, that we actually have a bit of a workshop on the information the draft that's been presented to us, because there's a number of questions that have arisen for me that I think are better discussed in a workshop rather than in a formal decision-making process. So much like we've done this morning with the outstanding water bodies, I think that would be a useful avenue for us to go through.
Would that be a workshop between now and the next meeting, or on the same day as the next meeting, as we have done today with outstanding water bodies?
Yeah, I think that
You don't have a preference either way?
No, I don't. That would suffice for me.
A workshop prior to the meeting, so
Or immediately prior, or
like the day of.
Day of.
Yeah.
Well, if people are saying that there's information comes to hand, they therefore need time to consider on it, reflect and digest before they come back to it. It suggests to me that having a workshop in the morning for the decision in the afternoon is not going to work, because that's what we're being told. So if take up the suggestion that it's a workshop to go through these to make sure people are aware of it, I would think that the workshop should be an intermediate step between now and the next meeting. That's what it would seem like. So that we have time. How long do people think they need to work through this to suggest? Fortnight, 3 weeks, whatever it is. At that point, have the workshop. Then you've got another period of time when we come back to the decision-making process. To have it immediately prior to does not give time for people to, what I've heard, digest, reflect, think, consult, do those things.
Just to be clear, we would effectively be just bringing the same paper.
Yeah, understood.
Oh, yeah, I get that.
Yeah,
That's fine.
So in terms of
I think if we are to hold a workshop, if people had specific lines of questioning that they're aware of in advance, that would help us develop how the workshop is going to be run, rather than covering everything and then finding that people aren't particularly interested in that point of the plan, that you're more particularly interested in, say, high flow allocation. Let's focus on that. What are your questions around that? Or if it's around stormwater, let's focus on that. Or are you looking for a complete run through the plan again?
Well, so if I may respond to that, Chair. Previously in workshops and the discussions we've had to date have been more around, I guess since the first sort of draft came back from Tank, have been more around the contentious issues so that we've dealt with those. But what I'm looking at is other issues that have been raised through, especially the feedback that came back from Ngāti Kaununu, and going because I've given that particular regard, it's raised a whole bunch of other questions for me about the substance of the plan change. I'm quite happy to forward those questions on to you so that you've got so that you're pre-warned about them all, that there's no surprises. So I'm more than happy to do that.
And probably useful to just copy everyone in if people want that, but I would certainly appreciate that so that we know what is being considered.
I like your suggestion. I think if people are having the workshop, then people should identify the parts that they want to be clarified for, and we take it that there's not identified, people accepting they're reasonably okay with it. So we've been much more focused. It then also demonstrates that people are engaged in this and are getting themselves on the process to making a decision. Because if it's just a workshop to cover everything, well, it's almost like turning up to maths on Monday morning to be told how to do your times table. It's a learning exercise, but I think we're beyond that. This is about examining to the point of making a decision.
Agreed.
Agree with that.
Agreed. Sorry, Mr.
Thanks,
Councillor
Madam Chair. We're here now at great cost to the ratepayer, I might add, highly paid committee members. I think it could be useful to, in fact, elicit some responses in a short period of time and then to leave the paper lie on the table into another meeting or workshop. But we are here. It's not as though we're all tank plan change virgins. We know a lot about this, and it hasn't just been dumped on us. We've got good knowledge of a number of the issues, and perhaps we could have those tabled for staff to go away and consider them in preparation for a subsequent either workshop or the next meeting.
Other suggestions?
I like that.
With that, I'd like to see some discussion today, get some clue as to where people have heartburn.
Okay. Well, I would support good use of our time while we're here. I know we'll be told when the outstanding water body staff...
They're just cranking out the slide recommendation now.
And that's fine. Okay, so...
You have a discussion or a cup of tea.
I'm not sure if you had a presentation prepared. No, okay. So perhaps we should just... I'll hand over to you or to Marianne. Kia ora, Marianne. And let Marianne go through what she wanted to go through, and people can put forward their questions, areas of heartburn, whatever it will be, to Marianne, and we'll just take it from there. How about that?
Yeah.
That's fine? All right, handing over to you, Marianne. Over to you.
Good to go?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person. Hopefully the technology won't let us down. So the report canvasses or responds to the extensive feedback that we received in the pre-notification consultation, and there were quite a range of issues that were canvassed in those submissions. Some were quite significant, and we've covered those in a little more detail in the report, but there were a number of minor observations, minor requests, and changes that were sought that we've covered in the table in the report in less detail. And so the major ones, the major issues that were raised, the first one being the recognition of values and making sure that they are properly provided for. And yes, of course, it's important to understand and to know how to provide for the values that people have identified so that we can set the appropriate water quality and water quantity limits. And we did do quite extensive work both with the tent group itself and more widely with Mana Whenua. And we've made a number of changes to reflect some of those concerns. And they're listed in the report. One of the big areas of contention was still an issue of significant concern in the feedback from the various iwi around the stream depletion provision in the plan. And while we did look at other options, and there was quite extensive modelling of some of the other ways of managing that effect, the end result was looking at stream depletion as the potential management regime for managing the adverse effects of those groundwater takes on stream flows. There were some amendments made to those provisions to make it more clear and to provide better direction, particularly in relation to how consent applicants were to deal with the obligations around managing stream depletion. There were also concerns around the allocation limit for high flow abstraction and provision of water for Māori development, and there was quite strong opposition to those provisions in the feedback from the various iwi groups. And despite that, we've continued to recommend the provisions be included in the plan, along with a number of amendments to make them clearer because of the opportunities those provisions provide. But the RPC may prefer to take the advice of the feedback received. There were obviously really big concerns in the urban space around both the water supply and the allocation provisions in relation to quantity for both our territorial authorities. The allocation limits and the fact that we have specified that urban growth is now constrained by those limits are obviously of great concern to the territorial authorities and their obligations under a different national policy statement around urban development, and so they were justifiably concerned around some of the provisions limiting that urban development. But we haven't really made any real changes to the fact that limits apply, but we have made some adjustments to some of the provisions that make it a little more flexible in terms of accessing water for urban development. And in relation to stormwater management, that obviously is something that has a significant impact on urban ratepayers, and again the two PLAs had significant concerns about how they would be met, and adjustments were made accordingly. There was quite a lot of feedback around allocation limits, particularly for the Ngāraroto, and although we haven't recommended any changes, we have tried to provide some more explanation around why there was no change. And finally, there was a fair bit of criticism, I think, around how the tank group came to the provisions in the plan, and requests or suggestions that a paradigm shift was needed and that the tank plan didn't provide that paradigm shift. But in actual fact, I do think that there was quite a shift in how people both acknowledged and took up the challenges around responsible land and water management that reflected quite a paradigm shift, not just in relation to landowners and the rural community, but also in relation to the commitments by the urban authorities around some of the challenges. And I guess it's a matter of perception, but the plan does deliver quite a different approach to managing water resources that looks at focusing on what will make a difference. And in the report I did mention the fact that the group didn't really debate the outcome that we're seeking, which is clean water for the values we've identified. There was more debate around how long it would take, not that something would need to be done. And the things that need to be done are now specified through milestones that are written into the plan. So there were no real changes sought through that feedback. It was more a philosophical approach, I guess, as to how people feel the tank plan is going to deliver the outcomes that the community is seeking. And so I'm quite happy now to answer any questions of detail in relation to all of those particular issues.
Could I perhaps just make a couple of closing comments? I'm pushing in front of you, Marianne. I just want to pick up on Marianne's last point and talk about two things. Talk about process and talk about possibility. And it's fair to say through the feedback that there was a large degree of criticism about the process undertaking to achieve this collaborative outcome. And it's just worthwhile noting that there is no defined process for a collaborative outcome, for a collaborative journey like this. And in particular, when this journey was started, it preceded some inclusions, amendments to the RMA that talked about collaborative processes. So I think what's really important is that we focus on what was the objective of the process rather than the process itself. And I feel that the objective was to capture as much of the community's input as it could through a sliver across the community, and get an appreciation and a shared understanding of everyone's perspectives and issues in relation to fresh water. So I just do want to make that point that when we look back on a 6-year process, and we can, if we dive deep into the terms of reference or any statements of process on the way forward, it's inevitable that there's going to be nooks and crannies in there that don't that people will be able to and maybe feel obliged to criticise and comment on. And I'm reminded of I think Dr. Nick Jones, who appeared in front of this committee to talk about the tank plan change process, and was asked on what he thought, and he said, well, we didn't get everything that we wanted, but we kind of felt that everything was put on the table. And look, and those of you know Dr. Jones, he's no patsy for this organisation. He's a tough taskmaster, and so and I think that sort of raises the next point around possibility, because sometimes when we go through these processes, if people don't necessarily get the outcomes that they were seeking or looking for, they will be more inclined to reflect on the process and see flaw in that. And so the question in my mind is whether, to how much is it the process, or how much is it about our expectations on the process? And there's an enormous amount of legislation and regulation that guides what we were doing through the tank plan change, and there's also an enormous amount of things that we do outside of the regulatory space across the organisation. And a lot of the issues that were raised and have been raised, not only through the feedback but through the entire process, speak to just as much a frustration around the framework that we work in, as opposed to how we worked within that framework. And it was actually, ironically, it was through the iwi forum that we had last July that I got the first sense, I suppose, of what I got a sense of the Māori expectations around reform, and that's a debate, and invariably we'll see that through the freshwater reform that's coming, where a lot of those issues in terms of resourcing, in terms of compulsory Māori values, will be debated as to whether they form part of our framework. But I'd just like to make the observation that because that is a fact because that is in fact a reform, it indicates that those are not part of the existing framework. And so staff have done the best to work within the existing framework and the guidance of there, and it is frustrating to some people that the inadequacies in that framework don't necessarily deliver the precedence or the urgency around their values. But I just want to pick up on Marianne's point. I do think there is a paradigm shift through this, certainly compared to the tools that we have at the moment and what we can and cannot do. And to me, and this is a personal comment, I suppose, that the irony in terms of, and look, I understand it, but in terms of the suggestions around Heratonga flow enhancement and iwi allocations seem to me to be quite aligned with some of the cutting edge of the reform that's been sought. And it certainly was a challenge that the community placed to this committee and us as staff to consider whether that was possible and could be done. And as Marianne said, we based on the advice we've received, we're still carrying on with that. So sorry to take up too much time, but I just want to make those comments.
Questions, comments?
I'll start, and thank you to Neil for suggesting that we actually table some of the issues that we're concerned about, not necessarily for further discussion and resolution here, but to signal the things that we think probably need to be discussed when we come back to it at a workshop in a few weeks' time. One that I'm interested in is number 55, page 44 of our papers. There's a range of small-scale water use that is permitted and does not require a water consent. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you can draw water down without a consent at up to 5 litres a second, and that actually amounts to more than...
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
It's not a question. I'm raising an issue that I want to see some discussion on. That amounts to 400 cubic metres daily, and given that we've got a very finite resource here which is 100% over allocated, we need to find efficiencies, and allowing the use of that volume of water, and I don't know how many consents there are, and I certainly would want to see that as part of the information we consider next time we discuss this. I think that allocation at 5 litres a second is way too high, and I think it should be cut back. That's my...
It's 5 cubic metres a day for permitted takes, and they're the ones that don't need a consent. So those are more your domestic takes or large-scale activities.
And it was 20 cubes.
It was 20 cubes, and it's down to 5.
A day,
Yep.
20 cubic metres. So
Okay.
we've reduced the permitted amount down to 5 cubic metres a day.
Right. Okay. Can we get some information on how many consents fall into that category? Because there's been an awful lot of new lifestyle blocks being developed in the past, I don't know, decades here.
Well, they don't actually need a consent. No. We don't have data
So you don't know how many there are?
from
Correct.
understanding where the development is.
Bloody hell.
That's minuscule.
Problem with the permitted activity.
Like the man in Whakatū.
So,
But I think there's been some estimates done, and it was immaterial in terms of the overall modelling of the resource relative to the other demand.
So I can't help... no, I don't want to get into discussion on it. That's not the purpose of this.
But we'll cover that off, I think, and come back in the workshop. Yeah.
Could you just remind us of which provision it was, Peter? I missed that bit.
It's paragraph 55 on page 44.
Thank you.
The man at Whakatū's got one of those.
It's on page 612 in the rules, I think, of the... Because I had a question around the same, or I had concerns about the same thing about just how much water was actually, what was involved, what was the scale of the issue, and if there's any way that we're ever going to be able to monitor it. So how do we know that someone's only using 5 cubic metres a day versus someone who's using 7 cubic metres a day? So it's about enforcing that particular provision.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the answer.
Oh, fuck yeah, I know how to take it.
Thank you.
They could put some tanks up and store it.
Councillor Balfour.
cubic metres. That's a lot of water, but if it's a lifestyle block, so you're feeding, I don't know, 2 horses and a cow.
Order.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Curtin.
For the workshop, I would like to hear a more cogent, condensed presentation of what additional burden this plan puts on commercial water users. And the reason for the question is that the tone of a lot of the objections that were tabled afterward is that this is a limp wrist, no paradigm shift, no buzz, no guts, no grunt, no regulation proposition that's been put forward here, which I think is utter cow manure. But I'd have to say that in the presentation of this, because we get so focused on crafting the language of a plan change, we kind of lose sight of what behavior changes would actually be triggered over the next 10 years by this plan, if it were implemented as it is put before us today. And just to take one example, look, we have put a cap for 10 years on water extraction from the aquifer. And this plan would codify that, but we've done it already, which means that any new use of water, whether it's municipal use from population growth, whether it would be people wanting to intensify farming, whether it is water augmentation, flow enhancement, whatever, any other water use, new water use, if you will, has to be funded, if you will, within the 90 million cube cap. That's a huge constraint on how business is going to be conducted in Hawke's Bay over the next 10 years. It will create pressure to consider water harvesting, water storage, and so forth. That's fine. In the process of this plan, we have specifically said we will not dam key rivers and tributaries. We've named them. We're not going to do it. And so for folks to look at this plan and say that it's not tough enough somehow, I think is utter nonsense. So I could go through 6 or 8 aspects of this plan that I think are hugely consequential to how our community will conduct its business over the next, and when I say conduct its business, I'm not just saying growing stuff. I'm saying managing municipal water, I'm saying storm water, I'm saying the whole kit and caboodle of this is going to be pretty dramatically affected by this plan as it stands. And to me, it's remarkable that given that, it has as much support as it did secure through the process that we've been through. And I would say about the process that the process is one thing and representation is another. Effective representation is a big issue here. In terms of what opportunities were taken, not taken, poorly taken to influence this process by all the players involved in it. And I think some people around the table have to take that on board and grasp the implications of that going forward on other business that we're doing around this table. And so what I would simply ask for is somebody to come in and reconvince me that there are a number of provisions in this plan that actually make a difference. What are they, and what's the difference that they will make? There are some areas where I'd like to see more push, but that's fine. I mean, this is 85, 90% down the path that I would want to push it. If I were just writing it tabula rasa, I'm pretty happy with this thing. So anyway, and I'm not easy to please when it comes to these issues.
Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will make the comment around the presentation of the papers. There's an extraordinary amount of work gone in. Marianne, again, well done for presenting it in a way that at least we can get our teeth into. So starting at that point, but I wanted, there are two areas of issue that I have, and the first one I'll cover now and come back to the other one later, but I do want to go to the section which I think is the most relevant, is Section 3, high flow water allocation including Māori development. So that section, beginning at paragraph 62, but more particularly page 46. If we can go to page 48 and 49 for this particular discussion, because I'm struggling with the advice given around, or the legal advice given around the restraints on, at paragraph 73, for example, and 74 and 75. I'm struggling with the constraints in legislation versus the proposal around the allocation of water for, and I'm not sure what the term now is, for Māori development, I think. If you can go to paragraph 87, we're looking to amend policy 56. The council will allocate 20% of the total water available at times of high flow, etc., for extraction storage. And then it's got the use of water for any activity provided that includes our direct brackets funding to a post-settlement governed entity. I can't make head and a tail of that. I don't know what that means. At a financial rate that is equivalent to the amount of water allocated for Māori development. So, number one, I don't know what it means. And number two, I think we need an explanation as to how you get there, given the advice that you've got around constraints to do such a thing. Can you help me there? And then the I don't know whether it's a minor issue or not, but the determination to only adopt post-settlement governance entities, such as around this table, for consultation, on what basis have you come to that conclusion? So two pretty significant questions.
You get those, Marianne?
I think, just to repeat, there was particular concern around the meaning of it's actually numbered E, around for the activity, and also a concern around the allocation for PSGE land. So in the first one, it was a bit of a struggle to get the concept out clearly, and obviously still haven't managed it, but what it was supposed to do was to allow for an application to take some of that 20% water, but to provide an equivalent amount of the value of that water, so the economic value, back to a treaty settlement entity. So the value of the water was providing for Maori well-being in terms of its contribution to a post-settlement governance entity. The applicant could be anybody.
So
had to make sure that as part of that application, there was the commercial reality of taking that water was provided to the Māori development objective as well.
So just for clarity,
I'm sure I understood your question about the.
Well, just for clarity, does 87E mean that the use of the water activity will at a financial rate, so that if it's determined that it's worth X thousands of dollars, and I'm not sure how you calculate that X thousands of dollars would be paid to a post-settlement governance entity. Is that what that says?
That would be the intent. A percentage of the value of that the water was put to would be provided to Māori development. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm now seeing the direction of travel, but it raises a whole host of issues about what value is determined, and it gets back to the issue of the post-settlement governance entity, it raises a number of issues that I hadn't anticipated arising from that. So
I've got a follow-on question from that. Where does the payment for the value come from? Given that when we allocate water, we do not make a charge for it. This is my question. So if the water comes in, there's no charge for it. Where is the revenue gathered from to make this payment?
It would depend on whatever the applicant was proposing to do with the stored water. So there probably wouldn't be an application if there wasn't some kind of commercial benefit in doing so.
That's the answer to a different question. It talks about transferring value for economic development and Maori welfare. So transferring value is normally measured in the current environment in cash, dollars. So where are these dollars being raised from to transfer them on to?
So in terms of the application made to take and use the water, and that could be granted with conditions that say some payment needs to be made to the settlement entity at a rate that's equivalent to the amount they're taking. So it would be a proportion of the income they're going to make through using and storing that water.
So in other words, what it would be, if I put it another way, it would be some form of royalty regime.
yes, just a follow.
Do we have the authority to impose a royalty on water? I'd be interested in this because I'd like to do it some other places.
Yes. I'm really keen to know that too.
I thought this proposal dragged us into a very vague and murky area of law, actually.
It's an enabling kind of provision, in that an applicant who wants to store water and use it for some end use is enabled to do so at the same time as taking into account the 20% that we've ring-fenced for Māori development, and it means that there's no particular requirement for Māori involvement in the use of the water, but that there is more of a rental built into it rather than a royalty, because it's the water that we're reserving for them that is going to be used by some third party but generate an income for the settlement entity.
Just to seek clarity then, Marianne, if I'm applying for this, I'm an applicant for this 20% or part thereof, and I'm growing kiwi fruit, or I'm growing a marijuana crop or the like, or I'm going to bottle the water, would I be assessed on the economic values ascribed to the business proposition and pay a royalty accordingly? Is that what that means?
You're paying for the 20%?
Yes, up to the amount that they are storing that is part of that 20% allocation, because I'm presuming it would have to be quite a big storage proposal to store the whole 20%. So it's likely there are going to be a number of smaller ones which can include a certain amount of that storage that then is part of an analysis through the consent application to work out, well, what is that worth given the end use of that water?
Is there any precedence at all for this type of royalty placement at all?
None at all.
None at all.
None at all.
Okay.
Exactly right. This is fresh and new ground.
Paradigm shift.
Paradigm shift. This is
Pioneers.
the other thing which I just say about this. I thought that this is to be some sort of negotiation. It puts the regional council in a difficult position of being actually an intermediary and a negotiator, and in some ways almost like a stock exchange. The people are buying broker to do these things. I don't envy the chief executive of this job.
Well, I mean, you can imagine when there's a claim of this nature at the national level, what sort of reallocation fishhooks will have to be.
You're differently explaining this.
think
I have a related question to that, Chair, or one of the points that I wanted to make was on page 52, paragraph 110, 110.5, it's the same sort of thing, because it's also mentioned in the policy and so on. There's this ability to transfer consents between one user and another, and whether that's creating a quasi market for water, which is I'm not entirely sure whether that's intent, because if you transfer the consent from one person to another, then obviously there's going to have to be a payment of some sort, or there's likely to be a payment of some sort, which is putting a price on water. And is that what the consequence of doing that, or having that ability is, or not? I don't know. That's something I'd like to see some more information on. And similarly with obviously the issues that have been discussed that Neil and Rick have raised. Pretty short consent.
Just to, there may not be a New Zealand precedent, but I'm aware that the Murray-Darling Basin has gone through a 15-year journey with similar principles, and that's led to their current situation, which is not at all great for the environment, nor for anyone involved in that process. So after being privileged enough to go and attend that conference with Councillor Hewitt, I did come back from that conference with some concerns around whether or not we as a nation would be moving towards putting that type of value on water. And then recently this year we've seen the Murray-Darling Basin report, those that have been following that, it hasn't met its environmental outcomes, so it didn't work, but a lot of people got rich in the process. So there are huge risks with assigning value to water. That was what I learnt while I was over in the Murray-Darling Basin. So while we might not have a precedent, I think there's a very active precedent happening in Australia at the moment that we should be cognizant of.
Yeah, and consents can be transferred, and currently, now that there is, as Councillor Belford pointed out, a cap on new allocations, I think it's only fair to say that that water value is now probably going to be represented in land value.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I'm conscious of the fact that time's moving on and we're going to lose a quorum, and we're not supposed to be engaging in wide-ranging discussion on these. We're putting issues on the table for discussion later, so can we please constrain what we're doing? 110 on page 52, other solutions. This is for water efficiencies. I would like to see some more discussion around that. I would like to see some discussion about the pros and cons of metering of water, because there's ample evidence that metering water in a community greatly reduces the volume that's used, and I think we need to discuss that. And also water storage. There is a suggestion in this paper that that's something that we consider in the future. I think we need to consider it now, and I think it should be compulsory that every house that gets built from now on has water tanks. Yeah, because we need more water, and we've got an opportunity to require that. So I think we need to have a discussion about that.
So anyway, we need water.
Sorry, one other thing while I have the microphone, and that is the hierarchy of priority of use, which is 120, I think. I think we probably need to have a discussion about whether that hierarchy is comprehensive enough, and I'm sure that one or more people would like to have a discussion in that context around water bottling.
Hey, you stole my thunder, Peter.
Can I just clarify, Councillor Bevan, are you talking about in relation to
Page 53,
paragraph 110 and metering of water? Are we just talking about domestic water? Use of water for domestic?
Well, commercial use is already metered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, another question?
Thank you, Chair. Just some more points I'd like to have some further discussion head on. Is the future of our spring-fed streams. I know you're talking about augmentation, but then what happens upstream from where the water is discharged into? So how soon after this plan is implemented do we expect to see the improvement in our the springs at source? Would be an interesting to have some further information on. Peter stole my thunder about the water bottling plants. I'd like to see us make that quite clear that the community is not too happy about that. The other one is about this transferring, to add it into this thing about the transferring of the resource consents. I couldn't see anything in the rules where it said that the applicant or where the consent has been transferred to has to reapply for a consent or already be a consent holder of good standing, whereas a part of the rules around looking at renewal of consents is that you consider whether they've had any abatement notices or anything else that's given to them, and we're not doing that it doesn't appear that we're actually going through that process when we're looking at transferring consents from one person to another. So I think that's something that's well worth considering. And I also think that when we are talking about looking at a consent that has had abatements or whatever, so you're looking at past history of that particular consent, we should not only just consider the consent but also the consent holder, because they may hold multiple consents, and I think we're missing a trick if we're not doing that, or if that's not part of in the case. So that was the unsuitable person. The other one is under the stormwater rules. On page 627, there's no mention of contaminant limits. Talking about, there's a bit of a discussion about contaminants not being allowed to be discharged onto land, but I think there needs to be some sort of limits or numbers put in there, because currently, as it stands at the moment, if you apply for, if you look at resource consents that haven't been publicly notified, they don't actually have any limits to the amount of contaminants that can be discharged onto land, simply because there's nothing in our rules. So I think there is a need for something to be included in our rules to cover that issue. And the other one under Schedule 5, talking about FEMPs, I think it would be appropriate that we look at this issue of what information we actually hold from the FEMPs and have that included in the schedule. I know we've had this discussion before about a FEMP includes a whole bunch of stuff that we don't actually need, and we should only be holding information under the Privacy Act that we've got a purpose for, but there's a whole bunch of stuff in a FEMP that we are going to use in terms of managing our land and water resource. So I think we should actually be holding that here instead of it's only been held by the draft of the FEMP, or whoever the FEMP actually belongs to.
Madam Chair.
I think that was the major of my list. Everything else is just stuff that's, yeah. There's a whole bunch of drafting things in there that I could go through.
Again, the invitation is there to forward those, so I suggest to do forward those because that's all good feedback.
Yep.
Anything else from you, Councillor Bailey?
Encouraging.
Oh, sorry. The other one. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the reminder. Because I had a big list of questions and I just sort of quickly went through the main themes. And one of the other main themes I had was this whole issue about going back and talking to iwi about different things and whether those costs, the costs of doing that, should be recoverable from the applicants for consents or consent holders. The ongoing discussions were tanking that, because one of the things we've been talking about around this table was how we're expecting iwi to do a whole bunch of stuff, and it seems to be we're not going to be recompensing them for their time and effort. So I think that's something that needs to be made clear in the I don't know, in the rules, wherever it is, or in the policy, that we do that, or something's done around that.
See, that is a most excellent suggestion. So I'm glad that you had the time to make that. Any other?
Well, Madam Chair, just following straight on from that, can I take you to paragraph 52? The inclusion of iwi in the design of the stream enhancement scheme ensures the maximum benefits, etc. Interested to see that provision in there, but we do need to have a discussion about when that takes place, what iwi are indicated as a result of that, who's engaged for that purpose. Is it the post-treaty settlement group as specified elsewhere in the changes made there? And the precise nature of that engagement, I think, needs a significant discussion.
Thank you. Any other comments to put to staff? I'll jump in then. I have just one, not necessarily at all supporting the high flow allocation, but there were some comments here in paragraph 87, which has already been alluded to, so paragraph E. There's a provision there about referencing the development of land returned to a PSGE through a treaty settlement. I'll be curious to know, and it may be in the papers, but I'd like to understand more, one, about this whole provision, but in particular that one seems somewhat prejudicial because different iwi had access to different land being returned to them by the Crown. So if you had a raupatu like we did, there was next to no Crown land that may have been returned. So in our case and in other people's cases, they may have received more cash in lieu of that fact, which then enabled them to buy land. But it's not land that they received through a treaty settlement. So just...
Yep.
That's I'm not sure if that was thought through, but I'd like some explanation about that, please.
So can I just test with you, because I think that's correct, it should either be land or land acquired through settlements, because it is the very nature of where this water is most valuable that Māori have tended to be most dispossessed in terms of these areas. So, so that's... Do you, and I'm just asking you off the top of your head, not hold you to it, does that idea or notion of effectively, because the problem is tying it to existing ownership of land is almost a futile exercise under those things, but land acquired either through or as a consequence of a treaty settlement process in principle is better than only for it to be like Māori freehold land that's already owned.
Well, I'd want to look at how it all works. I'm not quite clear on how it works. I'm just saying there's an assumption that iwi received land from the Crown as part of a settlement, and that is a negotiation. It's a historical fact whether there was even land available. So that's just random. And I'm not sure that supports Māori development. That just perpetuates some historical...
Yes, I agree.
Whatever, if that makes sense, sorry.
Can I just add to that, there is an issue here that if you don't have some form of definition, then any land which is held by Māori in any particular way, in any context, over any period of time, will then become eligible for it. So if you're going to change the definition, you have to be very careful here, because there's a lot of land held in this region by Māori, in various forms, and trust always has been. And also, if we're going to treat Māori PSC Māori bought land as a commercial enterprise, why would the council treat them differently from any other entity that bought it as a commercial enterprise? So we've got this. Once you move out of the treaty settlement allocation, you move into a much more complex ground over here with many more other issues that flow with it. So I'm just raising that if you're going to come to a discussion, I want to hear that side of the equation as well, because it's very, very complicated.
And also the point raised previously when we were at PwC, I think it was that should this be available to all Māori? Because someone could come from Ngāpuhi down to here. Is that appropriate when actually it's the tangata whenua that we're focused on? At least the tangata whenua reps are focused on tangata whenua. And given the historical grievances, it's about them being able to catch up through development. So there are issues to be dealt with. So I'll be very interested in being walked through this provision and how it's intended to work, because I know previously it was all new and was still being developed, so it would be good to walk through that and take into account all the issues that have been raised.
And I think that's why when we sent out our letters of consultation, we had specifically highlighted this as an area where we would really love to get some feedback. Unfortunately, we didn't get any to help develop the policy itself. So still happy to have feedback.
One quick definitional question. Throughout the discussion in the stormwater provisions, there's always reference made to discharge to freshwater And am I correct in understanding that means surface water or aquifer water, or groundwater? That's the meaning of
Stormwater. Of surface water.
Fresh water.
all the language about controlling stormwater is framed around discharges to fresh water. It's fresh water, surface water, and groundwater.
And stormwater by definition also should be the rain that falls from the sky. So I know there's people...
Somehow this got more complicated than I think it would be. What is...
You did ask the question,
You asked
Tom.
what is the
You did ask
definition
the
of fresh
question.
water? Yeah.
Is surface water,
Fresh water.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Groundwater.
is fresh
Groundwater is
water
fresh water.
Yes.
both surface water
Yes.
and groundwater?
It goes to, if I interrupt, it also is relevant to how the rules are crafted, because there's a discharge to water, which is direct surface to stormwater, surface water, but we would also have to make sure that there is an activity description that is this discharge of water onto land in a way that can get into water. So it accounts for the onto land as part of the activity description.
So that includes getting into groundwater,
Yes.
right? It includes getting into groundwater.
Yes.
Yes. I have a gentleman sitting behind me who's very concerned about this issue, and I want to make sure that this is the case. Okay, thank you.
Just through the temporary chair.
Focused on you. Did I call your name?
Waiting for the call.
Who else wants to call?
You've done this before, actually. Just following on the stormwater issue, I take you to page 57, paragraph 146, amending policy 26. I'll be seeking a far greater walkthrough of the stormwater, where you've landed, why you've landed here, and what occurs to me to be, on the face of it, very, very watered down provisions, excuse the pun, on stormwater discharge in relation to Napier City and the urban infrastructure.
Sorry, just to clarify, watered down from the previous iteration?
Yes, the removal of timeframes, for example. The removal, or not the removal, the non-appearance of existing infrastructure. Well, it's sort
I'll
of...
just clarify a couple of minor points for you. So, the policy 26 and deleted policy 27 have essentially been combined back into one. So there's nothing deleted per se, other than just combining the two.
Sure, all right. Well, perhaps I'll reframe my question and request for a walkthrough is why do we not have very substantial plan changes in relation to stormwater discharges by local authorities? Why are we left with this tepid, inconsequential plan change when it's an opportunity to do much greater things?
His version of my question is, are we too limp-wristed or not?
Why are we limp-wristed on this stuff? Why are we not getting in there?
Again,
and
just
making...
to clarify, this is not actually too dissimilar to what you had
I
agreed
appreciate
to previously.
that. Now I'm asking the question,
Okay.
why are we so limp-wristed?
Are you asking me or are you asking the committee?
Could I just say, I don't think that's fair in that you're putting all sorts of adjectives on here. What is it that you seek in terms of a factual change?
I want to walk through...
Put the limp-wristed part out of it. What is it you're looking for?
Much greater clarity and urgency in the plan changes we're making to ensure our stormwater discharges are meeting water quality standards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that existing today?
So the thing is there, so what I'm getting from you is that you want to have a measure of what we've got today in terms of the quality and the controls on stormwater today, what we want to in the future, and how we're going to transit from where we are today to that new future.
Absolutely.
You want a better description of that?
Yes, and if necessary, changes to reflect the urgency.
Okay, that's a clearer thing.
Happy to do the walkthrough, but if I can just also perhaps reassure you, the reason why the rules haven't been touched yet is that we've had an initial meeting subsequent to receiving the comments from Hastings and Napier. We had a meeting with staff and staff from both TLAs. We've had a follow-up meeting just with staff, so Anna, who you I'm sure all have utmost faith in, and making sure that our stormwater that's received in the estuaries is of stormwater quality, not contaminated quality. And also our consents team, we're going through those rules to ensure that they are robust and that they will be delivering the outcomes that we are seeking in this plan.
Well
so we will be
summarised,
presenting those back to you at the next meeting.
Good on you. Thank you.
Okay, great.
It's back, the batten's over here.
Oh, it's just finishing.
I've been
that one
dumped.
off. In terms of the existing, aren't they covered by the grandfather clause? They could be 10 years, 20 years old. Now you're going to go and change that law way back then and penalise them tomorrow. And I'm sure it's covered by grandparenting existing. Need to look it up. Hate to think we're going to get into a nice plan that we can't enforce. It is in plumbing, it is in the stormwater drainage. Yeah. So that's a thought. Back to that other lady, Mr. Chair.
So the point he's making here is, as much as we like grandparents in our personal life, we don't want them in our stormwater.
Yes.
No grandparents. So we're just going to move the plan up. Everybody goes up at the same time.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking for?
Well, I think it's going to be hard. You won't be able to enforce it.
Okay.
And again, that's why our consents team are looking very critically at the rules to make sure that they will...
It's still legal right now, and tomorrow it won't be legal. No, Crown won't wear that one. So I hate to see ourselves in another fight and wasting council money.
So is that comment clear for you?
I think so.
Question. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'd like to wrap up this discussion on tank now so that we can move on to outstanding water bodies. Okay, lots of nodding. Okay, so I thank you.
So are we going to defer or leave on the table?
Happy to move a motion that we defer this item till the next RPC, Hui.
Thank you. Do I have a...
I'll second it.
Yeah, but surely there needs to be something else than that. That we have agreed that we will have a
workshop
in the interim.
Yes.
And that prior to the workshop, all the members of the RPC are requested to put to the regional council what their concerns are, issues to want to be canvassed for that workshop in advance, so the staff can prepare.
Yes. Is that sufficiently clear for everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so we have I'll say that's a mover and a seconder. Whakaai tātou? Aye. Anybody against? No. Okay, carried. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Marianne. Okay, ka pai. We'll call back the outstanding water bodies team.
We'll go back to the other meeting.
Oh, heck, I thought we were going home.
No, we're going to change.
What's this? I'll give you a call.
Or she planned it should be.
And the question is raised by someone else's.
Are you going to have a cup of tea or are you getting straight into it?
No, we could pause for a cup of tea, but I'd like to just get into it and have a cup of tea later. How about that? Okay, thank
Work
you.
first, play later. That's my motto.
There's coffee, a couple of fingers of whiskey.
So I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chair.
Move the recommendation.
Good luck.
I think we'll just... Nice.
I'll second that.
Yes, Granddad.
Where can they find this?
Moved and seconded.
Moving it
All in
back.
favour, will say aye.
Or they got to get one extra sheet, or I've just printed everyone out one.
Well, we have some explanations for the recommendation, so I think we'll just tie hoa there for a moment. Thank you, Councillor.
I was trying to help you out, Madam Chair.
No, I like that.
One in the report?
What's that?
Is there one in the report pack or?
Yeah, there is one on the summary tables, but it's not set out like this.
Okay, just useful to circulate this.
It's fair to do so.
Pardon?
I think it's fair to do so.
So did really well.
Yes, but enough there.
This should be enough. We'll print it out
I don't even know what the recommendations
Until you ever got top of the pops, man. First equal one category, first another.
This is our, to see your place. It's like a fin, you know.
And as macro invertebrates in the Wairarua, top of mind.
Thank you. Oh, good on, mate.
This is good.
Thank you.
You
can tell Rex isn't here. There's a full toss of caramel bit that does.
Holy smokes.
Start that planting.
No natural character.
Who's that?
Yes, I think they have.
Then those must come
They
out
have.
faster than
Okay, almost there, people. Can we just give our attention to the team up the front? And I'll hand over to you to take us through outstanding water bodies. Thank you.
Okay. Tom.
So if I could just lead off and look, I appreciate we're in a public meeting now, and so I don't want to go over too much of the work that we've done in the workshop, but I just, what we, I suppose, experienced through the workshop is just once again proof that this is proving to be very challenging, very tricky, very dastardly little plan change in some respects, and I'm conscious that we all want to progress it, but progress it in a way that's only right and proper. So what we're going to propose in terms of recommendations now, and Belinda will take you through shortly, is roughly 4 things. The first is effectively, and just in terms of the recommendation, to incorporate the request from tangata whenua reps that the recommendations be modified to and capture the commentary in relation to Ngāti Pāhawera and Tūhoe in terms of their decision on how they're participating in this process.
Why not?
The second...
So this, the word, there's a word missing there, and consequently, the values for the water are not reflected. It reads better.
Sorry, which?
Someone just read it out.
1.2a.
Note dash.
And consequently.
Inconsequent, yep.
Does the consequence not reflect as a consequence of their non-performance rather than anything else? You're tying the two completely together.
Rick, you're right again.
That's right.
You're right again.
Okay.
I think it means there's another word missing, with which they are associated,
With which, yes, that's right.
are not reflected in the draft plan change 7.
Or it's included in like a catchment plan.
Yeah, that's right. I accept that too.
Next.
He's just sat down.
Oh, is that Kate's pie, Ricky?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get there eventually.
Thank you.
And a typo to Taumatua or Tūhoe. Taumata should be Taumata.
Or is it from back on the agenda?
That's correct.
Oh, we can't either them go.
Are we wanting to vote as we go along?
Is there a fourth one?
I'll just step through the process.
Okay.
Sorry.
The other recommendations really are stepping through the plan change and adopting a draft list and adopting it for pre-notification consultation.
And so in respect of that leg of what we're doing in terms of having noted that that was the first step, the second step is that it is proposed that the list provided by the tangata whenua reps in respect of cultural and spiritual values will be put up for the committee to to effectively vote on, with the proviso attached that staff will work over the next 4 weeks. So we will work and we will resource tangata whenua in a way that's appropriate to flesh out any gaps that appear in that list, and just in discussion with Ricky Ellison before, we think that's probably, even though the list is long, that may be a number as small as 10 water bodies that actually need to have that support ahead of notification. But we also, in terms of the discussion in the workshop, continue to, as part of that proposal, provide resource through the notification submission process to allow tangata whenua to help capture more information and capture perhaps unwritten materials in relation to the values in those water bodies. The third step we propose is to take the list of water bodies that have been listed and that we workshopped in terms of the ecological and wildlife and other values, and the decision for the committee that we propose is, do you approve that list based on whether you agree they're outstanding for the values highlighted in green only, or whether they are outstanding for the values highlighted in green and blue, or whether they are outstanding for values highlighted green and blue and red, and which effectively, as the workshop papers demonstrated, the green obviously had a lot of evidence supporting their conclusion, blue less, red less after that, and white none. The final step in terms of the exercise that you went through has identified that for a number of the water bodies that were nominated, potentially mostly through the expert panel process, that have yet to capture some evidence. What we're proposing is for those that don't have any colours, but captured in terms of the process that you went through, a 6 or above, that staff also, in addition to the work ahead of the next meeting, will get more information so that you have a better position to place to make a final determination as to whether those water bodies should be included in the notification list. So look, I appreciate that's a lot to step through, but
I'd just like to highlight the aquifers. They're all in white.
yeah, and so. So the Ruataniwha aquifer will be captured in that process.
I don't think you can. When you said 6, I looked at it. I saw that the Ruataniwha aquifer hit the 6, but the Heretaunga one didn't hit 4. I don't think you can have one without the other.
Exactly.
So you're going to direct us. So if you direct us,
I think you have to do both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Tom, are you saying that they have to have 6 in a particular column?
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's just an arbitrary number that has been picked, because I was about to suggest actually that maybe 5 might be fairer.
I was thinking,
And I think that you'll concur.
I was thinking more that Tutela and Papakuri is so intertwined that it's really, you should add them together.
Yes, I agree.
I think we should just be careful to note that some of these are going to be captured in cultural and spiritual list.
Granted.
If you added these scores and used 25 as a cutoff, there would be 12 on this list that have a score of 25, actually 26 or better.
Well done, Tom.
We could just discard the rest and
Which
go with those.
would include the aquifers. So
No, it would not.
no, I know, because we've just said we would include them, right?
Well, I'm just posing a counter approach.
Thank you. So my concern there is that actually, unless we go through and have a quick look, some time to look at it, that there might be a water body which has a significant value rating an 8, but it wouldn't meet your criteria, Tom. So the aquifers are examples of that, because they don't have all these other values, because they're a bit unusual.
We're going to walk away from them.
Yeah, no, they're inconsequential.
No, I understand that, but just playing the game and going with the process.
But you're quite right, because an aquifer by definition can't have wildlife,
No, that's right.
native fish or native plants. So it's, three places where we can pick up points on Tom's thing. It just doesn't work for it. But I like Tom's formulation with the addition of the two aquifers.
Well, I think even so, we're trying to determine whether on each of these there is an outstanding characteristic, and the difficulty is that if you go for a composite number, then you're potentially going to bring in water bodies that score less than outstanding or moderately across all, when you want the ones that are outstanding in one given category at least.
And just also by way of benchmark, there are some items that scored highly
I didn't count it.
that are still, in terms of the actual, that for which there is evidence and for which that evidence is actually not necessarily that sufficient to get it high of that threshold, so which is why I would urge the committee to err on the higher number, like 6 as opposed to 5.
We have got a two-line struggle going on here now.
Well, I think the difficulty is being presented with the information and then
We
trying
can just vote down the line.
to rationalise it in order to make a quick decision is challenging.
And the robustness of the information, really.
It's
All of that.
entirely open. So could I just ask a question of you, Chair, through you to Tom, who's been overseeing.
So, just a moment, can we have some attention over here, please?
My question through you, Chair, to Tom, is putting aside the 5, the 5.5, the 6, the 25, whatever it is, could Tom provide us with what he thinks on the basis of this are the outstanding things that we would highlight, so we can just have that as the thing, knowing that the committee is of a mind to add in, notwithstanding their pool ratings overall, both of the aquifers. So what have we got? Once we get that, we'll then see what we're looking at from there. So what would you say?
So I mean, I think if there's a desire to have the aquifers in at this stage and subject to some further analysis, then I think you can make an exception for the two significant aquifers without necessarily trying to gerrymander the number to try and include them, and I think that would be...
Yeah, we'll do that. So what's in, Tom? In your opinion? Go down the list.
In terms of the 6s,
yep. What do you say is it?
You've got the Tutaikura River for 2 factors, landscape and geology and recreation.
Yep.
You have the Waipunga River for native fish. You have the Ruataniwha Aquifer for landscape and geology. You have the Tarawera Hot Springs for recreation. And I'm looking further down. I don't think any below that has been additional analysis that we'll bring back to the next meeting for you to make, so you feel you have the information to make a determination.
So another way of looking at this then is what is out.
Oh, sorry, and you've added the Heratonga Aquifer.
Yep.
Heratonga and Ruataniwha. So what is out then?
In terms of the whites?
Well, is the proposal that you put forward some options? So just the green and blue, the green, blue and red?
It's based on the information that's been in the pack, yes. So that's effectively how wide do you want to cast the net in terms of evidential threshold?
So on that basis then, if we accepted the green, blue and red,
and everything with a colour on that list forms part of the list?
Forms part of the list for those values.
For those values, yeah.
For those values. Even though, for example, in relation to Lake Waikareiti, it scores 4s in 2 other areas, those wouldn't be significant values.
Look, based on the exercise that we went through, and again the fact that it's not a sum of goods, it's an identification of grades.
I'm just saying it gets a 4, the same as the reds, I see. that's,
Yeah,
I'm just trying to rationalise it.
Yeah, and look, and this is part of the overall challenge of trying to, do we just go completely objective, or do we try and only go to currently published reports, or do we progress beyond it and get other views like we did through the expert panel and the input from this table to support a broader assessment?
If you adopted the 25 rule plus any one that has a single 6 and the 2 aquifers, now you've jumped to 18.
Plus the 43.
See why we can't just accept them?
Just adds 2 that only have a 6, and it adds, and one of the aquifers is already included and adds the other. It comes up to...
That's shocking.
Yeah, and I think if you made it 5, you only get 2 more anyway.
If you're going to accept all colours, though, you're going to go, there's 1, 2, 3...
I'm ignoring the colors, I'm just using the numbers.
11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. There's 22 just on the basis of the colours alone.
I've got a more important question.
Yes.
Given that the Chief Executive said to us today that the key reason for doing this is because we've been told to by the court. Having gone through this and got this exercise complete, will we pass muster for the court purposes of the court's direction?
I believe so.
Okay, well then we're done.
Well, once the plan's notified, once it's not.
Then we're done. So that's what we're doing it for? We're done.
Hallelujah.
So I would still advocate 5s, including 5s as well,
Still
not
not
just
entirely,
6s.
I'm still not entirely sure because there's a list. So what you're advocating from is all the ones that are green and blue down here, and then
Reds as well.
well, there's no reds. There's no reds on this.
No. So effectively, what you've got to identify is the values, and we're saying we've identified values within water bodies that they're denoted green, and in terms of the slide that Belinda had up, she had what the definition of green was. It is the water body is a recreational landscape for which is blue. So the question I was putting, or the algorithm I was putting to you was, as a committee, you may want to make a decision based on this piece of paper saying everything that's will only accept the water bodies and their corresponding green values, or the green values and their corresponding water bodies, or we'll accept the green and blue values and their corresponding water bodies, or we want to cast the net quite wide and we'll select all the water bodies associated with either a green, a blue, or a red, plus the mathematical formula that we have spent a lot of time developing, that's still subject to some decision, plus the aquifers, or I suppose the Hiratonga aquifer, which falls outside that thing.
So that's why.
So effectively what I'm saying, it's suggesting it's the committee's decision as to whether it's green and blue, or green and red. Plus
So that's why the new Haka River falls out, because it's got a red box in it for native fish, but none of the start numbers there come up over 6.
Yeah, all the
That's
boxes
right.
has got nothing.
So the new haka would be in there for native fish.
So staff wouldn't recommend the reds?
Yeah, so staff's not recommending that. So when you went through that list you were recommending, you did not include the new Haka River for that because it didn't meet one of those criteria. Either had a green, blue, or a value that was over 6. Okay, so now I'm just trying to understand how you work out your matrix, that's all.
Science, it's absolute science.
Why did we go through the star exercise if we're not going to use it?
Yeah.
You are, because you're using it for the 6s. For the water bodies that haven't been, it's been entirely valuable exercise. And we're grateful for your feedback.
So the ones we're adding in are the Tararua Hot Springs and the Wairua River.
The aquifers.
And the aquifers.
So it's Wairua, and what's the other one? Just a quick question. If you put the weighting down for the cultural values, would it change up the figures or not?
No, I mean, a finding in terms of a cultural value doesn't make its fish value higher, but it's just, I'm just trying to think, we don't have a matching table with all the,
No, we don't.
with the
That's my
cultural,
point right at the beginning.
with the cultural list, but I mean, we can bring that up if you want to cross-reference a water body that you're concerned is not here caught for its defined values.
Aren't these all the...
Well, there's no cultural values in it. I was just wondering, I mean...
But aren't these all the...
I'm really surprised that we're going to make decisions premised on pink, white and blue and sixes, because it adds to the informed decision, but I'm not comfortable that all the sixes, all the fives, pink, blue and green.
Well, I mean, the pink, blue and green has been, you know, is a part of quite a detailed assessment of the information that we have, and staff are providing a recommendation that, you know, blues and greens, you know, from an evidentiary basis, you know, can be supported.
So Tom, we've got that list there. So where do cultural values come into it after that? So because we've got there was that other list that brought up before.
Yeah.
where there were different colour codings. There was green and something in blue, whatever it was. The recommendation from the tangata whenua reps is all those, the list of 43.
Yeah.
It ends at 45. 45 in total. Some of the rivers have been split into upper and lower, but
whatever.
it causes a total of 45 all up if you continue with some of the splits, or 40 all up. Yes.
So in other words, all of these here
are included.
Make the cultural value test.
They'll all be included.
Already.
That's what we're
But they only fail on the ones that aren't in there fail on not having enough stars or not having blue or green.
Can I just come back to
This hasn't got all the cultural.
Just come back to the point. I thought the Chief Executive put it really well earlier today when he said we are obliged by the law to protect, maintain and enhance every water body. So there's nobody going backwards. This here is an exercise we're required to do because the court said we had to do it to identify some water bodies. I don't think this is going to change our behaviour with any of them. As I understand it, we're going to do our job for every water body. So I don't see why we're angsting about this.
Well, because I think
whether we're going to be a 5 or a 6 or a 25, whatever.
Understood. So, thank you, Councillor. Any other views? Councillor Bevan?
I'm interested in your opinion on this. Close your eyes and pretend this doesn't exist. How many total outstanding water bottles
Take the outstanding away.
do you think Hawke's Bay or any other region should have? 2, 5, 25? How many?
It's putting me on the spot, but
Absolutely.
a sheer guess before I started this process would have been around 12, 15, because we're including the coastal areas and the freshwater areas.
Okay, well, Tom's analysis of taking combined scores of 26 or more gives us 13. Right in the sweet spot. So there you go.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Even if you add in the 5, only having a 5, that just adds one more, which gets us to 16 or 17. So we would have a combination of the popularity contest winners and the scientifically determined outstanding feature folks. It's a happy marriage, and it gives us, cuts our list in half.
So all they need to do is
makes us feel like we did something in this process that mattered.
Any other views? Any other views around the table?
I'm with Tom now.
So do you want to...
Okay, so I think to be clear...
Did the Russians interfere with this process?
To be clear, staff...
Have a checker and number.
Because the table's all over the show in terms of its beauty and splendour, it would help to know what was in,
that whole bunch there.
and most importantly for people around the table, what is out, just so we can be clear, because it's a
So we can
little bit
summarise.
blinding.
So every one of these plus ones that were identified, I think, through your Hui
Just putting cultural aside.
Everyone is cultural
so
and
understood that.
spiritual. Yeah. And so what you need to determine now is for the other values, which ones are you selecting in terms of making a determination in terms of the colours, and for the ones that you rated through your workshop process, for values that are not cultural but ecological, everything like that, whether you want some further analysis on that.
Yeah, so we have a couple of suggestions from very helpful people around the table. We've had the staff suggest you could take green and blue. Do not recommend red, although that's open to everybody. There's a suggestion, and maybe Councillor Balfour could put it more succinctly than I could recall, but what was your suggestion?
My suggestion is it has to have a combined score of 25, or it has to have a single attribute valued at 6, or it has to be an aquifer.
What has to be?
That gives, I think, 16.
What about the colours?
6 and above.
All the colours?
16.
Well, I'm just...
Yeah, it has to have at least one indicator of
colours.
6. 6 and above.
And no reference to the colours.
Just
No
start
reference
at
to colours.
6.
It effectively does track
I'd go 6 and above.
the ones that are more strongly recommended
Any that have no
colour-wise.
colours?
Some spiritual ones, but the process that we've been through.
I
BC5.
mean, the ones that add up, if you want to go down the list, it's the Haratunga,
Can you just go a bit slowly?
it's Lake Tatira,
Lake Tutira,
Lake, somebody's going to help me here, Waikare,
Waikaretu.
all right? Lake Waikaremoana,
Yep.
then all the way down to Mohaka River Upper,
Mohaka River Upper.
Narara River Upper, Papakiri Stream,
Bakeri Stream, yep.
Ruakaturi River, Ruata Inafa Aquifer, Tarawera Hot Springs, Haruri Estuary, save myself on that, Tugituki River, Tutakuri River, Waipower River, Waipunga River, and Wairoa River. That's the group that would
Can't do that.
meet those criteria.
We can't do this.
No, I'm just looking, we just needed to be clear what that looked like, I think, because there was some signal of support for that. Thank you, Tom. What's your feedback on that analysis?
16, I
Yes,
think.
for the other Tom?
I'm challenged by the fact that we are to identify the outstanding values and not the aggregate of good values, or the net effect of values. And so we do. I mean, the other way is to go through this line by line, value by value, and say, do you agree or not agree? So,
Could you turn around the other way, Tom, and so take, for example, the Wairoa River, and so the Wairoa River, and because of these outstanding values underneath it, the drop down, and then you've got them? Trying to save time here.
High significance.
I want to get out. Please release me. I've got 3 o'clock then coming.
well, the Wairoa River serves as an interesting sort of benchmark for the exercise that you went through, because it was rated a 7 for native fish, and in terms of the analysis that staff has done through available information, wouldn't necessarily support that.
I think this is an aspirational one. They want to push back.
There's a lot of aspects.
That's the point, that this mechanism is not there to do that.
This is protect. So,
This is where the science meets the technical meets the artistic.
it's
Or
difficult.
there's simply no science and there was no paper.
There's science.
No, I'm asking. I don't know because I haven't read it, so I'm asking.
It's very difficult to protect a value that doesn't exist.
The experts concur.
The macroinvertebrates say for Wairoa River, that scored very low from actually.
Okay.
So the other thing, Tom, from taking your analysis of, or staff's analysis of what should be included, and taking Tom's analysis of what should be included, there's only 3 additional ones that Tom would be adding in. That's Tutira.
Which Tom?
Tom Belford. That would be Tutira, Papakuri, which are quite related, and Whakariti.
For which value? That's what we need to know. So Tutira's in for cultural and spiritual purposes, but that algorithm doesn't identify the value that is outstanding.
Well, it does.
It just identifies the...
It does.
Well, it does to us.
It identifies the
sum.
recreation.
Well, if that's the case, Tom, if you're going to ignore the fact that Tūtera's got a sum total of 30 stars, like it's got 5 in natural character and 5 in recreation, why get us to go through the exercise?
Because the exercise helped identify individual values that were by, not the aggregate over, because we're finding the water body is outstanding by virtue of its significant values.
But what we're ignoring here, just for a moment, is that Lake Tūtera is in white because no analysis was done of it.
Because if we go back a step, back in June 2017, it was determined that we'd undertake a high-level review of a whole lot of water bodies across the region. That was 130 water bodies, and from there we stepped down to a candidate list of 22 for further assessment.
Yeah.
And
I just have your attention, please.
14 of those were identified for all value sets for secondary assessment, and then the rest were just for cultural and spiritual. And so we didn't do the analysis around the wildlife and the rec and everything else that goes with them. So that's why it's so targeted to the cultural value set.
So because Tūtera didn't pass muster at the first blush?
It didn't, not for all value sets. So keeping within the scope of that and using existing information, existing publications, that is what we're faced with, and that is where the green and the blue and the red come out. So anything that's green has really scored quite highly in the reviewed publications. Blue, still really, really good values, but not quite as good as the ones in green, and red, there's just not enough information, or it's not quite as good as the others.
So this gives the perfect example of the stupidity of this process. We are investing a shitload of effort in cleaning up Lake Tūtera and making it a model of recreational and other values, and yet we can't even justify it as a single outstanding
water body.
Why are we bothering? Who put this on our hot list?
Because it's
Why are we messing around with it?
Because it's degraded. That's right.
Take it off the list. Don't spend another penny on Lake Tūtera. Why?
Protecting national parks.
Does it even make the cut?
It has 0 outstanding values.
Well, as Tom said, it's the opposite of the management spectrum that we're working on. It's the most degraded needing fixing. At the other end of the management spectrum are the most pristine that need protecting. That's the framework.
No, but that's what I come back to. We're always going to crash into this. This was inevitable, this discussion. Because, and the reason for it is that this is one of the worst pieces of public policy I've seen ever. It was designed on
Executed. Brilliantly and eloquently executed.
Brilliantly executed.
Yes.
But did a fantastic. The job the staff have done here is just simply outstanding, and the work is great. But the question we were asked to answer is next to impossible, because it was just an electrical storm on Nick Smith's brain, who decided that we want to have the work done on outstanding water bodies to keep us all busy, and he did. It succeeded.
The angels can dance on the head of a pin.
To be fair, it was advanced by the iwi leaders group and insisted upon with the Māori Party for getting the amendments to the MPSF through, and its origins can be traced back to Hawke's Bay's Plan Change 5 in relation to the Heritonga aquifer and its non-inclusion in our previous...
Well, I did not know all that. We must have that included in a
That
paper
wasn't
somewhere.
included in your background summary.
The background is best left unsaid.
Okay,
right,
so people, we need to reach a decision, or I fear we'll have to come back and face this one more time.
No,
so
please.
with that threat,
You'll never get a quorum.
hanging over us, can we please
the recommendation?
Yeah, so let's look at the recommendations, because I think there must be some wiggle room around to get us over the line.
Yeah.
I just say, it seems to me that we're agreed on the greens, agreed on the blues, and the 2 aquifers. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Well, let's just hear from the staff, just to be very clear. Thank you for that, and then we'll discuss.
So, okay, you're right. Staff's recommendations are the greens. They're the ones that clearly stand out, or the greens and the blues. For all value sets apart from the cultural value set. And as we've heard, all of the water bodies, all 45 of them, stand out for cultural values and will be identified as outstanding water bodies for that value set. And the remainder will be just the two options that you see up there, probably option 2. And not including the red and the white.
Not including the red and the white.
What about the 6s? Off the 6s?
Plus the aquifers.
Plus the aquifers. The aquifers.
Yeah.
And plus 2 tera.
What?
Just a suggestion, just saying. Okay, so...
The room says it's not a quorum.
There is. Right.
Quick, hurry up before the quorum goes.
all the greens. All the greens. Can we at least just maybe take this step by step, not as a formal vote, but can we just take this step by step? Do we all agree the greens?
Yes.
Do we all agree... Oh, no one's against that, right? So do we all agree the blues?
Yes.
Anybody against the blues? Okay. Do we agree the aquifers?
Yes.
Anyone against that? Do we agree 6 and above? Or to make Tanya happy, 5 and above. First, 6 and above. Do we agree 6 and above?
No.
We don't agree 6 and above?
Stick with the greens and blues is where I'm at. Let's move
Okay.
on.
Anybody else agree with 6 and above? No? Well, dare I try for 5 then? No.
No.
Try, Madam Chair.
Okay, so can I just hear if there's any severe heartburn going on around the table about anything that's been eliminated? Because I appreciate that this has been a long, drawn-out process and we're all tired. It's after 3 and no one's had a cup of tea for at least 2 hours. Is there any heartburn around the table about the ones that are omitted? Because now's the time to speak.
Yes, Madam Chair, lots of heartburn, but I've got confidence that there are other opportunities to engage with this council to ensure that our needs are met. Kia ora.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Here.
If we are settled on that, then can we just go through the? Do we have a typed up? Were there any other recommendations?
They're all set out.
All set out. Up on the
Page
screen.
67.
On the screen.
Yeah, they're
Page
there.
67.
We went through and agreed them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2.
Yeah. So I.
1.3.
Oh, 1.3.
Go back. No, 1 point.
Comes after.
All right. Okay. I'll move all 4 recommendations.
Okay, so just before we do that, because I feel there's something that hasn't been properly spelt out, Tom, which is around what is the wording, because it needs to be in a recommendation, what is the wording around those water bodies that need further work and the undertaking from council to provide resourcing to enable that to happen in, you've said 4 weeks. I just want to be really clear because this is very pointed. This is at Wairoa. This is at Wairoa, Heretaunga Tamatea and Ngāti Hiniuru. Those are the people that are going to have to be involved in work.
In answer to your question, we passed a resolution in the workshop about that we take the time about the process. We're going to have another workshop. The work was going to be done. Did we not do that?
No, we haven't. But Tom's explained it, but I think for tangata whenua who've raised these issues, we need it in black and white. So can we please have it as part of a recommendation and a resolution?
That I can type up.
I'm happy to amend my motion to all 4 and put a 1.5 that goes that in the interim, staff are to approach, make direct approaches to those areas in which we have we lack information, seeking from the appropriate people their advice on what can be done to resolve this and offering to assist.
Yeah, so so we've asked those questions before. I'm very specific about offering resources, meaning money, so that people can actually appoint the people they want to do the work they need done in the time frame. Now, 4 weeks is not very long depending on how soon that offer is made, and then I think it's pretty unrealistic actually, 4 weeks. So this is a genuine plea. Can we please put something concrete in there, look us all in the eye, that this is what we're going to do, this is going to help move us forward with these iwi to get these water bodies backed up with proper information. So it needs to be a bit more detailed, I feel, than what's being put forward currently. Because I'm worried about the 4 weeks. How long will you get to put the offer there? Got to get someone contracted to do it. The money comes, boom. Then someone's got 10 days to produce a report. That's what that looks like to me.
It's our life.
No, I know that's your life, but we're dealing with money.
I'm not being flippant, but I mean, so I just, my reading is that I've never been cross-examined, but I feel like I'm under oath and about to be being cross-examined. So and so I can only just throw something out there in the form of the comments I made in the workshop, how I feel that this information has important value for us, not only in this process but beyond this process, and I would suggest something along the lines of, and you might want to wrap some wording around this in terms of the next 4 weeks, a commitment of funding of no less than $10,000 to support that process for the next 4 weeks. But given the fact that that is potentially very time constrained, and that we might come back in 4 weeks with a best endeavours approach in terms of information gaps, in terms of through the submission process, which I'm proposing is significantly is in the vicinity of 3 months perhaps, to give time for this in aggregate for both sides of that, a sum of not exceeding $50,000 support.
Can I? Yeah, sorry. There you go. That's right, Chair. Thank you. We have a challenge in that this is not a committee that can actually authorise the expenditure of funding, isn't it? So that's only the council that can authorise that, but we can certainly give you an indication that we want you to start the work, I'm sure.
Yeah, so you understand the difference where I'm coming from. So in the past, we have councils gone to iwi and said, I'm here now, can we have a conversation about what's important to you about these water bodies?
Yeah.
That's not the same as resourcing them to actually gather that information.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm not unhappy with spending the money to do it, because as Tom said, there's a number of different benefits of, not only to this particular piece of work, but also other stuff that we may be doing in council. It's just a process thing in terms of this committee doesn't have the authority to make expenditures on behalf of the regional council.
No, but I think Tom's actually indicated what he's got available to be able to spend to do that.
I'm with him on that, and that's where the other thing is, I came back to before, I said before, I'd like us to go back into this and see what it was. Your proposition says that it's about money, expending money. I'm not certain that that's always the case. It might be some other thing that resolves, so unblock it. But whatever it takes, within reason, to unblock it, I'm happy to do. But I don't want it to automatically be the default position. It's about doing this.
No, I'm just being realistic that we've been told before there's no budget to help with this. So I'm just trying to delve in here to be clear that if budget's one of the stumbling blocks, that money's made available. Yep. That's why I'm making it clear.
Can I just make it, sorry, Chair, can I just make it clear then that all that the Regional Planning Committee is doing is recommending to the Regional Council that happens. So as a council, we still have to agree to the expenditure, but that's fine.
Yep.
Like I say, I don't...
Yeah, so look, I don't think we need a decision from council unless the sums that come back from the analysis of the job to do exceed available budgets, because we do have a consultancy and advice budget for this plan change, and we have some flexibility within that overall budget, which is at Tom's discretion. But if it becomes something that does need your approval, we'll certainly come back and see
that's fine then. Sorry, thank you for that, Chair.
But also, the other thing I'd say to you, I've been through these processes before. The moment you say a figure, I've been through this where we're going to get advice on different things about PSGEs, about trust, about this, and as a figure, a person walks in the door, says, I've got $10,000 to do this. What does the lawyer say? $10,000. That's it, it's gone. I never put those things out. These are commercially sensitive. We put ourselves in a difficult position. I don't agree with that.
So, as I say,
I just trust the staff to go and do what's necessary to get the result. I don't care how he does it, as long as Tom comes back with a result. I'm not worried about whether the cat is black or white, as long as the cat is a mouse.
Well, then you
I've got
haven't-
time to get the mouse.
well, just to back up then, you haven't been listening to what I've been saying, because we have been approached by council numerous times to provide information. That does not work. So I want to be really crystal clear about what, if we're going to agree to move this process forward and do pre-notification consultation, I want to be really clear that what's expected is that staff are going to make an offer of resources to help unblock this issue to get it moving. And that may mean, if that's what will work for iwi, some funding to enable them to contract someone to collect this information. That's what I'm talking about. Not that staff then decide, actually, we'll go and have another meeting and sit there and wait for people to tell us information. That's proven, really, most times not to work. So long as we're clear about that, and the time frame, I think we just need to spell out what is the time frame, because if it's 4 weeks, that's very, very, very tight to be able to turn that kind of information around. So we've discussed before consultation periods and the length of time. There was an extension for the previous one. I know, Tom, you know, neither here nor there about a few extra weeks. So can we give some extra time, more than 4 weeks? Because that doesn't sound adequate for a report to be commissioned and done.
But again, see, that's where you and I differ on this.
I'm saying if that's what's required. It may not be required, but we need to allow time.
Give to a report commission to be done. I'm just saying that might not be the case. It
No,
may
no,
be.
but there needs to be time, and I don't think 4 weeks is long enough.
So my preference would be that you give us a chance to give it a go in the 4 weeks.
I'm with you on that.
It would be really determined, well, what would shape success is the scope of what the work is you require. Because I've seen previous scopes and it's pretty nebulous, so people hit the wrong mark. So it's how you apply that will ensure whether you get the information you need in the time that you need it. So just teed those.
So you want to give it a try within 4 weeks, and what happens if people are unable to turn it around within 4 weeks, contractors are not available or whatever? What happens then? Can we just clarify what happens then?
Then we probably need a direction from you that if we can't do that, that you want the notification, pre-notification period extended by maybe up to 2 weeks to accommodate that, in which case everything starts falling off.
6 weeks.
Can I just say, I'm uncomfortable about this conversation for another reason. We're now delving down into what I consider to be operational issues. We're supposed to be governed to make decisions. So we've said to the staff, we want this information, be back here within 4 weeks.
Yep.
You said, let me have a go and do it. I'm happy to trust him to go and do it. When we get down to how you're going to do it, what you're going to do, who you're going to see, where you're going to do it, we're then driving into operational issues, and I don't think we should be there. Staff to go and do it, give them a job, you to come back with the information in 4 weeks. Look forward to seeing it. How he gets it is up to him.
Good on them. Yep.
Well, I guess we have delved into this before, just on the tank plan change just prior to Christmas, when we made requests that there was not a notification period over the Christmas period, and that it would hold off, and that it would be at least 4 weeks. So that was...
And we landed on 6 and extended it.
Subsequently, that's right. So I think we have discussed it before, just to say, because we are concerned about making sure we get good participation. So can we just sum that up? Where are we then in terms of wording that we can put into a recommendation?
Ask me to remember what I said.
Do you have it typed? No.
I think what I suggested was that staff commit, and this is breaching Councillor Barker's commercial ethics, $10,000 to support that resourcing, or no less than $10,000 no, more than $10,000, sorry, for the pre-notification information gathering, and that if gaps still remain afterwards, or no, don't say that.
We don't need to have the amount in there. I think we've all agreed it. So don't put the amount in there, but sufficient funding to be able to
do what you need to do.
Do what you need to do. But just can you give us the words so that we can conclude that?
Complete this.
That without the number that we have.
That we commit funding to
within budget constraints to
undertake the information gaps analysis around any cultural, spiritual nominations.
Yep.
All right, so now we have them up on the board. I think. How are you going there?
There's two additional.
Do I vote against it? Are they? Is that you? No.
No. That's come up. Can you access that? No. No. Okay. This is also in the agenda item as well. So the first four, and then these two are on the end, and one around hearing commissioners, which probably can be delayed to a later date. So, which one do you want to go back to? The rest. This is.
So I'm just making sure that Annalise got this one. You got 2.1.
Yeah, I've got those two.
And
This is on gaps and
are we including 2.2?
spiritual analysis.
Yep.
So you're not going to have 1.5?
Annalise going to put it up because they're working off two different
So
documents.
they're all in there. 1.1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Because it isn't it? It's not start.
On the screen, or?
What page were you on again?
We're on 14 and 15 of the
Gaps.
staff papers.
To cultural and
Those recommendations.
Annalie, can you bring yours up here if I take this one down?
Yeah, we're just working here on something. Oh, yeah.
Kowtow is for everyone.
Tom, just while we're waiting for the technical side of that, so to commit resourcing or funding to undertake the analysis on information gaps on cultural and spiritual values associated with the outstanding water bodies?
Yeah, the ones notified today, yeah.
Cool, we're just trying to capture your wording, is that right?
Doesn't say that's by you.
My wording.
Okay.
Well,
Number 15.
On the fly, Tom, on the fly.
Identified today, correct.
Give an undertaking. Yeah, those are the
As you should.
But this one has to be recommended.
Within budget.
Someone has.
James wanted.
here we are. Okay.
Of those outstanding water bodies identified today.
Spiritual values of the outstanding water bodies identified.
Page you on.
This will be of the agreed outstanding water body.
It is.
Today.
Is it on the agreed?
Nothing in there.
That's why I lost count.
In the environment course.
The main thing is which bloody book am I?
Get lost in that too.
You talking about the outstanding one?
Any authorities.
Covering
We've got to figure out any
We're funding with the budget.
I pulled it all apart, stapled all those together, fucking sheets of
so they all intertwine with they link together. Yeah, I've got to come up with something that works for me like that.
especially when there's something that's, I don't like the workshop, and I need to put it all on the table and then see how it's been changed.
So that we don't go back and revisit the bloody list.
You've got policies,
From the approved list.
and they all interrelated, so into Port Part 2 and then try to put it
Isn't it revisited at the way it's my understanding you do? Yes, so I like the content.
You just have the list could be anywhere.
You've got to make your own then.
They're going to have, they're going to
I think you'll find the couple of people can go out.
Got 2 more things left, I think. We've got 2 more items left.
There won't be much, because if there was, we would have found it.
10 minutes and then you and Nikki are gone, so hurry up.
That's cool.
People are leaving at 3:30.
No quorum, and then we start.
Yeah, that's right. Better hurry up because there's 2 people leaving at 3:30.
We'll move the motion now. Put it to the vote and then amend it.
Not our finest now.
More muddled.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Hurry up because there's 2 going to leave at 3:30. We won't have a quorum.
I don't like it at all.
It's not very robust.
This is why every time I bring out carry that's from the terms of reference.
You're okay.
Best endeavours will be made to achieve decisions by consensus basis.
Waterways out of name.
And you guys go.
Which is the recommended consensus decision that we model do?
You guys are going to lose your quorum.
7 minutes and counting.
I yelled 2 minutes ago. Hurry up. They lose the quorum.
Actually, the woman elected to sort this all out.
So go over this one. I was just going to say,
Sort this all out in a confined space. Go girls.
And take the bucket.
Where are all the men when you need them?
Supervising with
Okay.
compromise.
All right, people. Are we going to be able to put it up there?
Good on you girls.
Okay, we're almost there. Here's the superb drafting of recommendations by the group.
Thank you, Steph.
So can we just scroll up to 1.1, receives and notes the report, blah, 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 selecting a list of outstanding water bodies, receives and notes the other report, notes that Ngāti Pāhawera and Tura Taumata, is it Taumata or Taumatua, M-A-T-U-A, Taumatua, M-A-T-U-A. Yep. Or Tuahoi have elected not to participate in the outstanding water bodies process and consequently their values for waterways with which they are associated are not reflected in the draft plan change 7, agrees on a draft list of outstanding water bodies for inclusion in draft plan change 7, no staff, so we need to change that.
We take that out?
Take it out.
Remove it, yeah.
So how are we referencing, we're just referring to draft plan change 7, is that right, Belinda?
With that specific one will need to be, how do we identify it? We need to refer back to something too.
Yeah, to the one attached to the papers.
For agreed attachment.
Cut it out, Tom.
I'm fairly certain, but it's right. Reference to an attachment.
Simple as that.
this shifts it from Nikki now back to the settlements.
Which version number is it?
We're now referring to either.
Well, isn't it,
Version
sorry,
Alpha
so we're
Centauri 5.
effectively amending what's in the papers,
However,
and the papers have a draft plan change attached,
put in our plan change.
so we can amend it here to refer to the draft plan change 7 attached to the committee papers. And Belinda, you were saying, but it doesn't include 3.
Yes, it's missed out 3.
Ripia, and your one, Jen, what's the name of your extra awa?
Te Pairahi.
Te Pairahi.
And then put with the inclusion of, and then list those 3.
Yep.
So just put
Te Pairahi.
the inclusion of.
What were our
R-I-P-I-A. R-I-P-I-A. Sorry.
Don't ask those Paronga.
Comma.
Hautapu, H-A-U-T-A-P-U. And how do we spell your other one, Jen?
Te Pairahi. P-A-E-R-A-H-I. Pairahi.
Yeah.
Te.
Te Pairahi. Pairahi.
Te
separate word, yeah.
We can say of the Ripia, Hautapu and Te Pairahi rivers. So can we just, the draft plan change 7, do we say in here attached somewhere? Like attached to the papers provided to the committee? That's what you're talking about, right?
Quicker they're going to get this out so that at the office knows.
Yeah, it's in the,
Oh, it's in there, there.
it's in the,
Okay.
and then it's got a blank over the actual list. It's sent to be populated after the meeting. So I've got a placeholder for the list of outstanding bodies.
Yeah, so agrees that the draft proposed plan change 7, attachment 1 should be released for pre-notification consultation. Direct staff to assist iwi authorities to provide information and commit funding within budget for those iwi to undertake the analysis of information gaps in cultural and spiritual values of the outstanding water bodies and draft plan change 7. Pardon? Oh, can we have order, please? We won't be reading out one more time, we'll just be putting it to a vote. Number 2, the Regional Planning Committee recommends that Hawke's Bay Regional Council release the draft plan change for pre-notification consultation with those usuals in accordance with Schedule 1 of the RMA, provides for a period of 4 weeks for pre-notification consultation with those parties identified in 2.1 above. Can you just go up to 2.1?
That full list is attached to the agenda item 2.
And you've noted Rongamai Wahine Iwi. Yep, okay, I'm comfortable with that. So that's the suite of resolutions. I propose someone kindly put all of them. Maybe the gentleman who raised it before. So that was you, Fenton. Rick?
Yes.
Would you like to propose them and Fenton second it? Do we need to talk any more, people? Would you like to talk to your...
I reserve my right to speak and I reserve my right of reply.
Tick, tick, tick.
Well, I can't reserve it. Look, I think this is, get it on the road. Let's get this thing started. Look, it's going to be contested, whatever happens, whatever we put up. Yeah. So let's get it out there and get on with it.
Yep, thank you. Now, is this when I invite anyone else to talk?
Yep.
Yep. Anyone else feel the need to talk? Awesome. Rick, back to you.
I just want to say thank you to the staff for their outstanding work on this. What I think is that the work that I've read on all the outstanding water bodies, a huge amount of work. I was deeply impressed by the quality of it. Deeply impressed by the thoroughness of it, and I thought what's happened here is we've taken a snapshot of Hawke's Bay at this point in time, and it will stand us in great stead for decades to come. So I'm sure people who want to will come back and look at that and say that was the state of the environment in Hawke's Bay. That was what they thought of. That's how they viewed these things, because that's what it is. It is a benchmark of our environment today, and I want to thank the staff involved for doing such a superb job. It is first-class, gold standard, top quality work. That is no doubt.
Thank you. So moved and seconded. Whakaae tātou?
Aye.
Anybody against? Awesome. Thank you. Right, so we just have 3 minor things to be able to wrap up and have a cup of tea. Yes, 4 minutes. Resource Management Policy Project update.
I'll move it as seconded.
You'll move and second it?
I'll move as a seconded, yep. I'll move it.
Second it. Move it, second it. No one needs to speak to it. Do the staff need to speak to it? Because everyone's in a
Going to
hurry
lose your
now.
quorum very shortly, so...
Yeah, cool. Statutory advocacy for May, we'll take that as read. This is the next item. Yep. All sorted, we'll do a big wrap up.
I'll move that as well, Chair.
Yep, and the same person can second it. Thanks, Jen.
Take a pick.
Discussion of minor business items not on the agenda. There was one, wasn't there?
No,
It was
no,
pleaded.
you did
We did it at the beginning.
at the time.
Awesome. Superb effort, everybody. I declare the meeting closed with a closing karakia.
Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai i o tātou i Karaiti, me te aroha te atua, me te whiwhinga tahi tangi, te wairua tātou. Safe journey home, kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Piri. Kia ora, everyone. Thank you.
I'm glad you.
I'm going to get one.